Hi, and welcome to this initial slice walkthrough video. In this video, I will cover the most important features and functions in Slice, as well as those that are maybe not that obvious and people often ask for. So let's get straight into it. When you open Slice, you will always see the main editor. Here you can chop or manipulate your audio sample. In order to load an audio sample, you simply drag a WAV, FLAC or OGG file into this window at the top. Make sure to always check if the sample BPM is correct. Slice will try to figure out the tempo of the sample. However, this algorithm will not always work. You can adjust the tempo of the sample you have loaded here at sample BPM. You simply type in the correct BPM, hit enter, and Slice will process the audio. Slice will also try to read out the file name. So if you load a file and the file is named as loop 140 BPM, then Slice will automatically detect that the tempo is a parameter in the file name, and it will use what it finds in the file name. So this is the main editor. We also have a slice sequencer, a drum sequencer, a bass sequencer, and a playlist editor. I will talk about all this shortly. On the left side, we have the library browser and the preset browser, as well as the sample browser. Let's start with the sample browser. Slice comes with a factory library of samples. You can browse these folders by simply clicking these subfolders here, and now you can preview the samples by just clicking the sample, right? You can drag the sample into your DAW, into the sample window here at the top, or into the slots in our drum sequencer. You can also add your own samples to this sample browser. There are multiple ways to do it. So one way is, if you have a folder on your hard drive which includes samples, you simply can drag the entire folder into this window here at the top left. Slice will now create a copy of this folder in the data folder of Slice. So now we can access these samples in our sample browser. In order to access this folder, go to Settings and click Open Slice Content Folder. You will now be taken to the content folder of Slice. And if you go into Samples, then you will see the copy it has created for our drum kit folder. You can also create folders and subfolders in here. You can copy your own samples into this folder, and then you will be able to access them in Slice's sample browser. Okay, let's talk about the preset browser. Here at the top you can select the library, the factory library, or if you own any expansion packs for Slice, or if you maybe create your own library, which you can do by simply clicking this Create button. Here at the bottom you can select the preset you want to load. Keep in mind there are always two types of presets. If you load the regular preset, which is basically the orange color, Slice will load the sample only. Nothing else. No information for the slice sequencer, no information for the drum sequencer, no information for the bass sequencer or playlist editor. It will be just the sample, so you can start your production from scratch. If you load the beat button next to each preset, Slice will load the information that is available for this preset. And when it comes to the factory library, you will have slice sequencer, drum sequencer, bass sequencer, and playlist editor information available for almost every preset. So if you now hit song mode and click play, so now you can basically listen to what we have created and what you can work with. And this is the part where the most people have questions. How can I play back these melodies, these samples, these drums, these bass sequences in my DAW? So let me show you how everything works. Let's load a completely new sample, the On Fire preset in this case. And first of all, I would like to talk about the keys. The blue keys are the individual slices. So if we press a blue key, you will also see which key triggers which slice. It will go on playing because play to end is activated. If we deactivate play to end, playback will stop every time it hits the end marker for this slice. You can simply move these markers back and forth. You can also preview the slice by hitting this play button. Right? You can zoom in and out with your mouse wheel. But I think this is pretty obvious. So, as I said, the blue keys trigger these individual slices, and the first 2 octaves are basically reserved for triggering the sequencers and the drum samples. So if we load this BeatStarter preset here, we will see that there is a slice sequencer pattern available, pattern 1. We have information in here. If we would play back this pattern, we hear that it basically plays this note C2. You don't have to do this in slice. You can also do it in your piano roll. So if we open the piano roll in our DAW and play back C2, we are basically doing the same thing as we did here in this slice sequencer. You can also copy the information from the slice sequencer into the piano roll of your DAW by clicking the Slice MIDI button. You hold your mouse button pressed and drag it into the piano roll of your DAW. And it basically has created a copy of this sequencer in your DAW. And if you now hit play in your DAW, it will play back the slice. And if you change the tempo in your DAW, you will see that our plugin adapts the speed of our DAW, right? If we now hit play, it plays back much slower. So in this preset, we also have drum sequencer information. As I said before, the second octave basically triggers these drum samples. Means you now can go into your DAW and so this is one way how to trigger the drums. You can do it in the piano roll of your DAW. You can also do it in the drum sequencer that comes with Slice. When you hit the play button here, you will see that it plays back this drum sequencer. And now people often ask, how can I play back this in my DAW? So there are two ways to do it. For one, I told you that the very first octave triggers the sequencers. So drum sequencer pattern 1 is this key, it's E. So if we now go into our piano roll and the very first octave and hit E, we are basically playing back the drum sequencer in Slice, but synced to our DAW. And if you would change the preset, it would always play back the drum sequencer, but the sequence would change. So let's do this. And a use case would be, let's say you have created a melody using any virtual instrument, for example, something like this. And now you want to use drums from Slice. You simply trigger the drum pattern in the very first octave of Slice. Let's pick another drum sequence here. I think you get the idea here. Another way to basically play back these drums in your DAW, or to sync this drum sequencer with your DAW, is if you click this drum MIDI button here at the top, you hold the mouse button pressed and drag this MIDI file into the piano roll of your DAW. And now when you open your piano roll, you will see that we basically have copied the whole MIDI information of this drum sequencer into our piano roll. And if we hit play in our DAW, we can hear the drum sequencer. You also can edit, manipulate, delete these notes, adjust the velocity, whatever your DAW offers, you hear. And the same thing also applies for the playlist editor. You also have a playlist MIDI button. You can basically copy everything you see in this playlist by hitting this playlist MIDI button, dragging this MIDI to your piano roll. And if you now hit play in your DAW, okay, so this is how this MIDI button works. A lot of people had this question: how do I sync Slice to my DAW? You don't have to sync it. Slice is always synced. So if you change the tempo in your DAW, Slice will always follow. Keep in mind, as soon as you change the tempo, you see that some offline processing is going on. And unless this offline processing is not done, there may be some syncing issues or whatever, so please wait till the offline processing is done. You see it usually goes very fast, it's a matter of seconds, and then you can play Slice in your DAW. So as you see, a lot of stuff is drag and drop, right? If you want to change samples, simply go in here, pick a sample, drag it into one of these slots here. Here you can right click, say fill each 2 steps. You can also drag files from your hard drive into these slots. You can drag files from this browser into your DAW. Whatever, right? You can also click these slices and drag them to your desktop, to your DAW, whatever. Same thing for the bass sequencer. Simply drag whatever sample you want to use into this window and start to adjust your sequences here. Okay. There's not much we have to say about the main editor. I think these features and functions are self-explaining. Here you can loop or reverse the sample or slices, fade in, fade out, pitch shift, and so on and so forth. I think this is all self-explaining. There's also not much to say about the Slice sequencer. You can create 4 patterns. You can also copy this information. Here it does not make much sense for such an easy pattern, but let's say you want to create a copy of this drum pattern. You hit copy. You go to the second pattern, you hit paste, and now you eventually want the same pattern but don't want this hi-hat. So you clear these steps, and now you have a variation of this pattern in pattern 2. And as you see here, in order to trigger these patterns, here you trigger pattern 1. and here you trigger pattern 2. This would be interesting if you create your playlist, right? Pattern 1, pattern 2. Okay. This is the length. Snap to grid is basically the grid size. All very self-explaining. We have covered the most important features and functions of Slice. You will also get some help if you hover over features that you're unsure about. A little pop-up window will appear. For example, this will bounce all the drum patterns as audio drum loops to a folder called Initial Slice Drum Export, which you then will find on your desktop. So if you are unsure about a specific feature, hover over it, don't move the mouse for a few seconds, and Slice will give you additional information. Drag this button out of Slice to export the drum sequence as a MIDI file, and so on and so forth. There's one more thing I would like to talk about, and this is the effect section down here. So we have basically 4 effect racks in Slice. Effect rack 1, 2, 3, and the master effect rack. In each of the effect racks, you can load effects. You hit the effect button and select your effect. Boost X is dynamic saturation, ILA1, what is basically a rotation point compressor. Delay, reverb, chorus, lo-fi, and so on and so forth, right? You can load these effects, adjust the parameters, and also change the routing by simply moving these effects back and forth. Effect rack 1 at the moment is set to the Slice sequencer. So here you see FX routing means the Slice goes into effect rack 1. We could also say that we send the Slice into effect rack 2. By default, it's set to 1 for every preset. Means Slice sequencer goes into effect rack 1. The drum sequencer goes into effect rack 2, which you see here. Drum sequencer goes into effect rack 2, and the bass sequencer goes into effect rack 3. So if you add effects to effect rack 1, it will affect the Slice. If you add effects to effect rack 2, it will affect the drums. And if you add effects to effect rack 3, it will affect the bass. And all these effect racks at the end come together to the master channel, and here we basically process the whole stereo sum before we hand it over to the DAW. So this here is basically our master effect rack. And some people had the question, when I bounce the drum sequencers or when I bounce sequences, why is the master processing not applied? So if you go into the playlist and you hit bounce to wave, we basically create 4 wave files. We create a stem for the slices, a stem for the drums, a stem for the bass, and a stem for the master. The stem for the slices will only have the processing rendered to the file that also belongs to the Slice channel. The same for the drums. the drum stem will only have the processing rendered to the file that is applied to the drum effect rack. In this case, it would be channel 2 because we have set the drum sequencer to channel 2. Same for the bass sequencer. And only the master file will have the master processing. If we would render the master processing to each one of these stems and you would mix them together in your DAW, then you would have basically the master processing multiple times and you end up with a lot of saturation, distortion, clipping issues, and it just wouldn't make any sense. So yes, I think in order to cover the basics of Slice, that's enough. If you have further questions, you also can ask. support@initialaudio.com. Happy beat making. Talk soon.